This is Creativity in Captivity. I'm Pat Hazel, and it's comedy time on the podcast. Today's guest has had multiple appearances on The Tonight Show and Conan. His comedy album was recently nominated for a Grammy, and he has numerous Netflix specials. He shares what it's like to be from a funny family. He gives his picks for the Mount Rushmore of Comedy, and we explore the notion of starting a sanctuary to protect gummy bears. He is more than just your average guy. He is the greatest average American. Coming up, Tennessee's own Nate Bargatze.
That spark of electricity, a skipping stone that sets you free. You're captive to a mystery, the curse of creativity. La 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 la, la 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 la.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
It is fun, and I'm kind of thrilled for it because I saw you on a Netflix special that you shared with several people. You were the first guy out on a series, the Standups. And I thought, I wonder if this is any good. And you were the first one that I saw. And I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And that was sort of my first discovery, even though I had heard your name through several peers that were comedians that had said this guy's on the rise. But you have a reverse Superman syndrome, which is that you are super comedian by day, and then at night you perform as mild-mannered Nate Bargatze. Your being a regular Joe is why everybody feels like this dude's a friend of mine.
I mean, I don't know for sure that's why everybody says it, but that's the goal, is you want people to think that they're hanging out with their buddy. Like when people always come up and they say, hey, like you remind me of someone, that's always the best compliment you could possibly get. And then they're like, you know, you're like my brother, you're like my friend or whatever. You're my husband. It's just relating to them, even relating to like relationship jokes. Sometimes the wife relates to my side versus the husband relates. You know, it's like just talk about stuff that's happening every day. It's a huge help.
I like it. And I also like your style, which is really just you talking. You're not going punchline to punchline where it's like a natural storytelling, which kind of sneaks up on people. And I'm sure when you were starting, when you would step into clubs where people were bada bing, bada boom comics, was that a difficult transition from coming off of other comics to your stuff?
I used to always say, like, I never thought of myself as a storyteller. I never thought I was like good at telling stories. I didn't grow up like, and it was like, got to hear these stories. But I did start telling stories. And then at first I was writing jokes and I would kind of do a joke, but I was always in the joke. So it was always around me. So I would do the jokes and then I would also do the stand-up. And I always thought I was a storyteller in a joke form. Like I could tell a story in a joke form. And so I never try to be too far away from a laugh. And that was just pure panic of like when you do shows in New York, I never wanted it silent. I was almost scared of the silence. So I would always just try to be always just on top of it. You know, and the farther you are from a laugh, the bigger the laugh has to be. So I never wanted to put that much pressure on a joke. And so, you know, unless I want to put that much pressure on a joke. But most of them, you're like, I want it to build up, you know, and slowly just, it's like I'm getting you, you're laughing, you laugh, to build up this big, gigantic laugh.
Well, but now you're not afraid of the pause because there's a little more security. You've developed a style. I think when a comic begins, that silence, you think you're bombing if there's 2 seconds of silence. But imagine that's like a musician playing every square note in the face of the audience. And the music is between the notes. You know, just as in art, it's not the thing they're drawing. Sometimes it's the negative space around the thing that makes it interesting. It takes understanding your own voice and point of view to be able to enjoy those pauses.
Yeah, I'm still learning it now. I've went from clubs to theaters. So New York's very fast paced. So you're doing audiences that sometimes they don't even know that their comedy show's about to happen. You're like in a restaurant or you're performing for people that are just there for whatever reason. So you got to win a lot of people over. And then you go to clubs, like start headlining clubs, and it's like still kind of a rapid. And now doing theaters, it does need to breathe a little bit more. I still have the fear of it. I don't ever just sit completely in silence, but way more control of it now. And I'm actually playing with it even right now just to learn, you know what, I can slow down. I can sometimes get too fast where I'm like, I don't think they're even getting all the jokes. There's points where I don't know if I care if you got all the jokes. I'm kind of trying to make it be rapid, but there's times where I need to be like, oh, I got to slow it down and like let that joke sink in, whether I come back to it later or whatever reason. You can set yourself up a lot, which is nice.
Yeah, and they have bought a ticket to you, which is quite a difference to buying a ticket to a random comedy show and 2 drinks off the street from some comic slapping tickets on their hand saying, come tonight, I can get you in at half price. And the amount of times in LA, when I first moved to LA, I remember sitting down with a fellow comic to eat lunch at a place called the Elegant Tortilla, a Mexican restaurant. And there was a thing on the table that said comedy show tonight. And we're looking around going, where could they possibly do a comedy show? And so we said to the waiter, where does the comedy show happen? And he said, oh, right over there. We roll the salad bar away and then we push those tables to the side. And he goes, are you coming? And we go, well, we're comedians. We just moved here. He goes, oh, I book it. The waiter was the booker of the show.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You know those days, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When we showed up to do it, when they started moving the salad bar, the audience had no idea a comedy show was about to break out. You know, I don't even remember how the night went. I just remember the one joke, which was I got up and said, the Elegant Tortilla, this is pretty nice. You know, last week I played the sophisticated burrito, and this is so much nice.
Yeah.
You just kind of grab what you can grab.
You grab whatever you can. I mean, that's the stuff that teaches you all this. It's the confidence that when you do these bigger shows, it's like, well, none of them can go as bad as they've gone. It's just impossible. Like you do a theater, you're like, I did a show on a TGI Fridays. It's not going to be worse than that. So it's you do feel more comfortable as you get longer doing comedy. You're like you have the jokes too, and you're like, I know what I'm doing. And I remember Louis C.K. said once, he's like, you don't get good at comedy until like 20 years. And when I heard it, I'm like probably 8 years in or something like that. And you're almost like, come on, man, you're picking a number that like feels like it's impossible to get to. But now that I'm at 19, I get what he's saying. It's not that you don't get comedy at 8 and 10 and 12 and all that, but like where I'm at now at 19, it's a different game. You know, it's like you're funny. And so then you can talk about a lot. Everything kind of opens up where you can talk about, but you don't want to take advantage of the crowd. I mean, you still have the threat of like right now, they have high expectations. I want to meet their expectations. I want to exceed them. Your pressures are just very different, but they laugh a lot more at even the little stuff.
Do you remember in the very beginning what your, let's say, signature bit at the time, which was like a actual comedy bit that you thought, I'll never be able to do a show without this thing?
Yeah.
When you build the very first thing where you know you're a comic and now you got to go do 5 minutes and 10 minutes and 20 minutes, like that thing is always coming with you. And probably now it's incidental.
And when I first started, I always used to say, like, what's good for comics is you need to learn how to murder, like we say, like you need to learn how to kill. So you got to like do the same jokes over and over again. Like open mics are tough because you can't really work on the same jokes. You got to try to some points get in front of real crowds and get a 5-minute set you know is going to work. Like, you know, that like if the Tonight Show walks in right now and said, you got to do a set, you know what you would do. You got to have that. So then you know what jokes are supposed to sound like when you're like, all right, these are doing good. And then when you add the new jokes, you know, oh, I got to get them up to that. And I mean, I had a joke about Superman or something. It might have a joke been done, but it's like, it's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's Superman. Like someone's eyesight was that bad. They can't tell between a bird, a plane, no, a man. It was like that kind of joke.
Right.
It would destroy. So I closed on that at the beginning. So when you're doing those, I mean, you think, well, I'll never write a joke as good as this. Like, this is it.
If you close your first Tonight Show with it and then they have you come back, you're like, wait, what? I got to have another closer?
Yeah, I got to have another one? No. I mean, I can barely remember the joke now. And there was a point, that joke was the most important thing in my life. It just always changes. You never feel like you can top what you just did. For me now, even when I tape a special, you're like, well, I don't know how I'm supposed to do more than this. I'm out of stuff. There's nothing I can ever talk about. And that's how you go into every new hour, with just pure defeat. And then somehow you figure something out.
That's what's interesting about the wave of it. The first time you reach a level of having a headline set, you've built up to 45 or 50 minutes. You figured out how to deal with the checks are dropping, fighting with the margarita machine. And I remember one of the bits I used to do when the checks would come, because it's deadly. That moment, you're revving them all up, and then the checks go to every table. And everyone's looking down and they're trying to split. Did you have that? Who had that? You know, and you're like, ugh. So you have to kind of come up with a check covering bit. Like you just have to just wallow for a little bit, and then you can come back when the focus is there. And I used to reach down and take the check off the table in front of me, and I go, oh my God, who had the total? That was very expensive.
Yeah.
And they would laugh a little bit, and then I was like, all right, let's get this done, people. But when you do have that headline set, you think that's it. Now you're covered in body armor, and once you spend it on a special or in some way you've gone out there, it's not like a folk singer where they want to hear those things over and over. Once the special's out there,
Uh,
you go back to the bottom of the totem pole, you're mining for gold again.
yeah. I mean, that's how it goes. You know, it's funny, the check spots. So New York, when you try to get into the comedy clubs, they had a check spot, was an actual spot where you would go up and do checks. And it'd always be like when you're a new comic. And that's how you would get in with the club, is be like, I'll go up there. I remember doing check spots. People don't realize like how crazy check spots are. Last call is not easy either. Last call is pretty tough because they go, anybody else? The table's like, oh, do we want something else? And all this. And then, but the checks come. I could argue people wouldn't have known I went on stage. They're just in their own world. So you be in New York and you just get done, just silence. And then they bring up the last guy.
It's interesting that in your most recent special, that was the outdoor special you did, social distance. That was the greatest average American. And then, of course, you're faced by helicopter chase going on, which turned out to be great. It was really, it
Yeah.
showed how nimble you are and how on your feet you are, because this is a big moment to be taping a special. And you don't expect one helicopter and then more helicopters. I know that you dealt with it on stage and we can see it if we go to Netflix. But what was your internal monologue as it began to happen?
Well, the whole thing was like, I had to buy a new a sweater that day because I didn't think, well, it's going to be 59 degrees outside or 61. Like, it's a little chilly. And so there's like all this stuff that's added to it. You do 2 shows when you do a special, and then you edit the best of them. The first show I did 43 minutes because the audience had masks and I couldn't really hear them. People understand like that. I was timing that set out to be like 60 minutes. And just the energy of a room can take 17 minutes out of it. It's unreal. And then when the helicopters happened, I'll be honest with you, I needed them because I needed the time. But when we heard them, it was like, all right, it was like that kind of sound where you're like, you can't tell if everybody knows. Sometimes if you're like, if they can't hear it, I don't need to say anything. But it was getting so loud that you're like, well, I can't not address it. And so I just addressed it. And luckily it was funny and it worked out. And that's why we left it in. If it wasn't going to be funny, we wouldn't have. But it kind of showed the moment that we were in. It was COVID. It was outside. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen. We found out later there was a police chase. And that's why there were so many helicopters. That's why they kept coming back. It made it like interesting. I was glad to put it in. I don't really do crowd work. I don't do like kind of this kind of stuff. And so it was fun to be like, you at least get to show everybody, well, like I can't do it.
Right.
I don't hope to do it.
No, I know. At that point, probably wishing they drop a rope ladder and take you out of the mess. What a great ending. Did you see Nate go up in the sky there?
Because you don't know when it's coming. You're in the middle of a joke and you're like, I'm towards the end of this joke. I said it in the special, like I can see them. And so I'm like, I got to get this joke out before that helicopter gets to where it's going to interrupt the laugh. And it was a whole mind game.
It's fun though, and it's great that it is captured on tape because you can't recreate it. You're not going to tell that story after the fact. It doesn't really kind of work the same way. I remember a horse and buggy sound going by the outside of a club one time when I called it an Amish drive-by or something. It just only works for that second.
Yes.
How much writing do you do of material discipline during the day versus writing on stage, retelling stories to hone them?
Yeah, it's all on stage. I never write. I write set list out, and I'll write a set list out a lot. That's about the only writing. Maybe if I come up with a tag, maybe I'll like try to put it in my phone or something like on stage. I think about it. If I have something happen, I'm just kind of all day, like it's in my mind and I'm like swishing it around and like, I'm excited to go like do the joke. I'm excited to tell the story. It makes it fun to do. I like doing that. Like I like working on stage. That was a very New York thing because you could go on stage every night. And when you're not telling jokes, like I was never like a joke teller, it was hard for me to write stuff out. So I would just tell it and you kind of fill it in the moment. And now over 19 years, it's like I kind of have a general idea if it's going to work or not going to work. I'll still throw some stuff out. I do a lot of it now in these theaters. When I'm building a new hour, like I'll tape another special. And when I get done taping it, you got basically 4 months until the special comes out, where you want to try to have like 40, 45 minutes new. And so I open with new. When I switch it, I can keep a really good track of what I'm doing. And so like I know like, all right, I made it to 15 minutes tonight with some new stuff. And the crowd's excited. They're more lenient at the beginning. So it's like I can kind of put this stuff in kind of a safe place and just kind of be messing with it. And then I have some old jokes too that never made a special. I'll just pull those back out. And you just kind of do that. And slowly, You just build it until you don't have to do anything old again.
Tell me this, who are, for you, some of the faces on your Mount Rushmore of comedy, people that you looked up to?
I would say Seinfeld. Seinfeld's a big one for me. I'm a big, big Seinfeld fan. A comedian, when he did that, the last time I'm telling you that special, I could quote that special. Giant Seinfeld fan. Brian Regan. My dad bought a CD, and then my dad called me. It was like 2003. And then my dad was like, you got to get this CD, Brian Regan Live. And it was like, when I first heard it, I was like, I don't know how this guy's not the most famous person alive. Yeah, I don't know. I was just like blown away by it. And then the other two it could be Chris Rock, then Eddie Murphy. But, you could have Chappelle or Chris, probably both. I like Chris Rock and then Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy, to have that material at that age, it'd be 22, that's a phenom.
Yeah, he was so charismatic and he was so dynamic, just a bust-out star.
Oh, yeah. It's hard to come up with stuff. He has no real life experiences at that point. Like, that's where a lot of your comedy comes from. You got to think he's 22, he's famous, and to be able to put out Raw and Delirious, which was so funny. It wasn't like heavy or it wasn't this thing. It was just funny. At that age, it's pretty wild. Yeah, I think, roughly those. But I listened to Seinfeld and Regan. Seinfeld I listened to the most growing up.
Well, I sent him a text today saying that you and I would be talking. And I said, hey, have you seen Nate Bargatze? He said, yeah, I really, really like him a lot. Great stuff. He said he didn't recall ever meeting before. So I don't know if you have, but.
No, that's my dream, is to meet him. I'm honored that he even knows who I am. So I've never met him or never really talked to him or anything. I would love to talk to him one day. And hopefully, I figure one day maybe our paths will cross. But I'm obviously a giant fan.
He had a big influence on me in my early career. I had seen him on The Tonight Show when I lived in Omaha, Nebraska. So it was a fantasy come true to be in LA and be working at places like the Comedy Magic Club with him, and eventually working with him on his sitcom. And I wrote with him on some American Express commercials, and got to be an opening act. And it was the sidecar of success every step of the way, to be there when the theme of his sitcom was being written, and the greatest dome covered tour through comedy that you could get was to be in his satellite.
Oh yeah. There's a comedy club in Cleveland called Hilarities, and they have like a fax or something. That's when they found out, I guess, the show was getting picked up. And so they faxed over to that club. The fax is like still up there. Yeah. I'm like obsessed with that guy. And I moved from Chicago to New York, and it was because of comedian. Just to be able to see that and see him and see the clubs. And so many comics around my age, and it started around my time. That was like everything to us.
And for the listener, though, I want them to know the documentary Comedian was not widely seen. It played in theaters, and I went, and there were two people there. Jerry had come off his show, and he had retired his material. And this show showed him developing new content, going to those places like the Comedy Cellar in New York, and also kind of owning the fact that while he was famous, he didn't get that long of lead from them before they wanted material. And he showed all of that growth and development. And it was actually pretty brave and vulnerable to do, coming off of a 9-year gigantic hit sitcom and retiring his stuff. So, I do think the comics loved it, because it was like, wow, this is a brave new world to start fresh.
You know what's funny? I saw it, I think, alone in theater in Chicago. I don't want to say, but it was like, I think it was. I watched it by myself. I tell people when they want to go like, well, what's comedy like? I go, watch Comedian. That will show you what it's like, and you enjoy it. It was so good, and he's just the guy. He's the one everybody listens to, and I don't wear short sleeves because like he said not to wear short sleeves. I don't wear shorts on. Like, there's all this weird stuff you're like, well, I won't do, because he would be like, I don't know why someone would do that. And I'm like, well, I'll never do it now.
Yeah.
Never, Jerry.
Well, that's kind of great, though. That's kind of like having your own Obi-Wan Kenobi tell you what's the next step to become a comedy Jedi, right? And I remember I was very young and went as an opening act. I went to the non-sexy cities. There was always people who wanted to go to the big hot cities, but I would go to the cities that people didn't want to go to.
And he was selling out, right? Like theaters back before the show, or?
He was doing well. And it was funny because we were flying commercially initially, and then something happened to a flight, and he said a phrase that was really interesting. There was a chance to rent a private plane, At that time, it might have been $3,000. That would seem like a ton of money. And he said, I'm going to die with more than $3,000 in the bank. So let's do this. Let's get to the venue. Let's do the show. And so we were on the plane
Wow.
with his touring producer at the time. His name was Kevin. What was funny was we had a debate about how quickly we could fall asleep on the plane. So we had a bet, and we literally were facing each other with our fingers crossed and our feet on the ground, having a bet who could fall asleep first. And the other guy, the
Yeah.
third guy, was supposed to keep an eye on it. And he's got
Yeah.
a Zen way of doing it. I can knock out on a plane like nothing, but how could you even know who won? You both have your eyes closed.
You're both asleep. Yeah. I mean, the idea that two comics are doing that is
Yeah, it's
great.
the nuttiest thing. And there were so many funny moments that just generally off stage, being in his presence, he's a guy that is always in observation mode. And, they always talked about people could cross the street with him for a slice of pizza, and the other person would come back
Yeah.
with indigestion, and he'd have 10 minutes worth of material. So I do remember kind of one of the crazier moments. We were in New York playing somewhere, and I was opening for him. And I don't know if it was the Super Bowl or the Rose Bowl, but there was something on the weekend, and we were watching, and he goes, well, it seems like we ought to have a wager on this. We got to bet. And I was like, okay, well, what do you want to bet? And I can't even tell you who the two teams were. He goes, well, let's bet a sandwich, a lunch, a sandwich of something. Okay. So I take the team he doesn't want, and the thing is over, and he wins. He goes, you owe me a sandwich. I go, okay. So now I'm returned to LA, and I think I'm going to be hysterical. I make a sandwich, and I put it in an envelope, like a manila envelope, with mayonnaise, with lettuce, the works,
Yeah.
and I mail it to him. This was
Oh,
before there was any kind of white dust in envelopes and pre 9/11. So I do that, and I think it's hilarious. And like 2 days later, he's going to call me and be laughing. Well, he didn't go home for like 3 weeks. There was this soggy, moldy. It was like the freakiest thing that he opened, and he's like, "What is this?" And I was like, "I owed you a sandwich." Like I was like sheepishly, like it was a joke that bombed, but it just felt like I have to do this.
I love it. Well, that joke is actually great. And it's just funny that he didn't go home.
Well, and so it kind of startled him. It wasn't like, "Oh, that's hilarious. You owe me a sandwich." It was like, who would send me a big pile of bologna? And
You should almost never told him that his whole life he would just be like, I one time got mailed a sandwich, and I think about that guy every day. Like, where is that
Right.
guy at? Is he watching me at all times?
I know that's the thing. You're always terrified when your mail arrives. Oh no, now it's
Yes.
spaghetti and meatballs.
He stayed with stand up, like him and like Leno. I like that they stayed with stand up. Stand up is the reason it's the reason I get to do anything. I want to do it for the rest of my life. It's the thing that I love the most. A lot of times you see guys like they quit or Letterman stopped doing stand up. A lot of people stopped doing stand up. That's why I always loved like Leno. Leno did it. Leno did shows. He did spots. He goes and still does shows and spots now. Seinfeld did all
Yep.
that stuff. Like, I like the guys that are like, look, I will die doing stand up. This is what we do.
Yeah, and I think Jerry always equated it to surfing, that the art of being in there is getting up on that board and finding the wave and then cresting the wave and knowing when to start back up. And that is a very live experience. Nothing can replace that. The sitcoms, the movies, those are long-term, slow release laughters with pledge, and you don't even know if it's getting a laugh in the other city.
Mhm.
So that immediacy, I think, is where the adrenaline rush is, even if it's just the aha of the audience taking that moment and, sparking them.
Well, you can dissect it so much. I mean, like you said, it's like, it's that reaction. That's what's funny. They always talk like comics, like you go try to sell a show or something, and they're, like, I don't know, this is funny. And you're like, well, I do, because my job is I find out every night if it's funny. Every night I find out. It's interesting when you do the same jokes over too, and you can tell like they laugh at different points. The second they're going to laugh, which is always crazy because, making someone laugh is not easy. But like the word that's like, and now you're about to start laughing. I mean, there's nothing like it.
You also know the moment that you slip up. One word difference, not funny, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you just go, oh, why did I tangle that moment up? And then you kind of feel slightly crestfallen that it's like, I just chipped myself out of that one extra laugh.
I would always have outs on my stories. And so I just always have like exit ramps. Like I can get off because you get stuck where you start telling like some 5-minute story and it doesn't go good. And you're like, dude, I am in this story now. These people are not on board and I have to just tell it a ton forever.
I love that term though, exit ramps, because it makes a lot of sense to me. When I was doing a one-man show and I didn't want it to be the same every night, I had a thing I called open and closed doors. If I got into an area about childhood games or something, I could totally open the door and say to the audience, what did you play growing up? What was it that you bought on eBay? Whatever. The dialogue was fine. And if they were lively or they had a cool story, I'd keep the door open. If they kind of got quiet or they didn't really engage, it just close the door and go to the lawn chart bit. And I have to tell you, that was some of the most fun any night, because I would talk about what did you take to show and tell? And a moment where you ask a question where they go, I haven't thought about that in a long time. And then they say, well, I took some roadkill, or whatever they say, their spouse looks at them like, you've never told me this story. A person just bursts out with some thing that they should be talking to a therapist about, and they talk to you about it.
Yeah. That's a fun question to ask them. What did you take on show and tell? Because it makes them think.
Somebody forgot it was show and tell. So on the fly at the bus stop, they had a stick and they picked up a cocoon. They found this like gray cocoon on the roadside. They got it on a forked stick and carried it into the science class. And they watched it for a week and then realized it was a dried dog turd. But they had believed it was a cocoon that was going to blossom into a butterfly. So it kind of got them by on show and tell that day. Big aha on
so
Friday.
Good.
I know. And to hear them tell the story, like I can't top it on stage. And I always say to them, I don't care who gets the laugh tonight. It could be you, it could be me. It all counts.
Yeah. I agree. So I always say, dude, I don't care if you're laughing with me or at me. It's all laugh.
I want to step back a little bit historically, because I do know your dad, and I know that you have exploited your dad from being a clown to being a magician to all of those things in the titles of your albums and in the storytelling. And he's a very funny guy. He's a very unique guy. He has a unique set of skills. And I had the pleasure of seeing him not that long ago when I was in Nashville. His enthusiasm for, I had some bit I was trying to do at a corporate thing, and I wanted to do a COVID testing gag. And when I just told him the slightest bit about it, he was completely invested. Okay, we're going to the hardware store. No, we're going to the auto store. He wanted this bit to work. We're going to drive, we're going to fix it, we're going to build it, we're going to make the thing happen. I mean, he was in it deep, and it was so fun. And you know that side of it because you grew up as a kid with a magic dad and a clown dad who was always coming up with gags. And like, that's the ultimate dad joke, is to think that everybody's dad that's how they behave.
Yeah. The difference is it's like, well, they're professionals at it. They're better than the average dad at all this stuff. When you grow up around that, I mean, when I was just born into it. When I first started talking about him, like, it wasn't like my first joke was my dad's a magician, which most people would think. It's like when you grow up and your dad's a magician, there's a point where you think, is everybody's dad a magician? It doesn't seem weird to me. It's what I saw every day. It was like, he might as well have been a construction worker. And then it was when I started like telling people about it and talking about it. And I was like, oh yeah, that is right. That's right. This is crazy.
Right.
Then I started talking about it a lot. And my dad's awesome because it's like, it's what I got from him. I think I get my timing from him. He's always been fun to like, I've made fun of like our Bargatze family. We're a very fun family. A lot of crazy stuff happens. So there's a lot of stories, and everybody's always cool about like talking about it. Like, I mean, I love everybody. So you have love and when you tell all this stuff, but it's no one's upset about it. It's always about the joke. My dad would always be like, well, if it gets a laugh, then it gets a laugh and you need to do it. And to have someone that understands that, it's pretty rare, especially with comedians. I mean, nobody gets it's about the joke.
He's getting the last laugh as it's circling around, right? Because you've been talking about him so much that your fan base now knows him as a character, and yet he's got a very good comedy act. And so he's now on occasion opening for you at these venues. Like, he gave birth to a job security by having you become a Vegas headliner.
Yeah. He destroys too. And like, that's the thing, like he's about to retire. He can come out to whatever he wants to come out. Sometimes it's like, it's a grind out here. So it's like, you can't go, we're doing every weekend, but like he'll do a lot. I don't really announce it. So no one knows. He'll get a standing ovation when he walks out. and then he destroys. And that's what's fun for me and for us, my mom, my brother and sister. My dad's unreal, and we've seen him our whole life, and we know how great he is. And it's nice to now see people be like, I think they think, oh, you're bringing your dad out. They're like, all right, I'll go along. I'll watch your dad. When I meet people afterwards, that's all they talk about is him. They don't even talk about me. And I'm like, hey, I did a pretty good job up there, all right, everybody. And they only talk about him because he destroys.
Well, let me ask you this. You have siblings. So what business are they in, and does comedy impact that? I mean, if you're from this funny family, did your brother and sister end up in something where comedy is beneficial?
Yeah, well, my sister will tell you she's the funniest in our family. My sister works for me now,
Okay.
which is great. As things gotten crazier, I've needed to hire some people, and I love doing that. My brother teaches at a school. He's vice principal at the school now, a school that he started with some people. And so he was a missionary. And that was like my dad's big joke was like, at the beginning he's like, I got a son that's a missionary and a son that's a comedian. And my sister was like, had a regular job or something at that point. He's like, so basically guaranteed no money. Just a missionary and a comedian. My brother does a lot of speaking and talks with people and has just a giant heart and is really great with that. My sister is she's very funny. She's a good go with the flow person. She's got like that attitude. And my mom is very funny too. My mom always makes jokes. I mean, people, when they hang out with my mom, they're always like, oh, she's actually pretty funny. Like everybody's got some fun and funny to them, and it's really a perfect like comedy family. I mean, you can't really hurt her feelings or anything, and it's just about being funny.
That's a pretty good testimonial, though, for Nate Bargatze to give his sister the funniest in the family endorsement. She could probably go on the road on her own with just that.
Yeah, well, she might be dirtier than me because she's not afraid of my parents like I am. Yeah, Abigail's always funny, but she'll tell you. You can just ask her about it. I got this new hour. I got a couple of little things about her and something about my brother too. But it's fun because she's the youngest. She lived a different life than we lived.
What are your fans called? Are they Natelanders, or do you have some name for the fans that follow you out there?
When we say folks for the podcast, for the Nateland podcast that I do, and so like say hello folks, and
I see.
I don't really say anything about my stand-up. I mean, it's just, I look at them as like, they're just me. It's a bunch of me's out there.
Right.
Like they're, you want to be relatable and you want to be like, yeah, I look at everybody in the crowd, you're like, I probably would be friends with all these people. I think we all have a lot in common. And yeah, there's not a word or something.
No, that's fine. It is interesting because I don't think it's an insult that you're a normal guy, but I do think that it's kind of like fanfare for the common man. Everybody comes out like it's a reunion with you, right? Because they're just your people. They're like cousins and friends and neighbors and all that kind of stuff. So you started a podcast. Did that start over COVID times?
Yeah. I've always kind of debated. I like the idea of, I think it's good to be funny constantly and have to be like the pressure of like you're recording something, you got to be funny. And so during COVID, when like everything kind of died down, it was like, all right, I should start something because it's like, I just want to keep moving. And it's really helped me. And like, it helps you, I don't know, you're pacing and a lot of stuff for your stand-up. I enjoy doing it, and then with the people that are listening to it, like they come to shows now, and they're just such great people, and and it's just about being funny, and so it's not like we try to get heavy or anything, and you just go be funny on it, and that's just a good muscle to always be working. I know comics that stopped during COVID, and you can tell, like when they go back up, you're like, they are rusty. Yeah. You can really fall off, and so you got to really stay on it.
It's also hopeful, even though it's got a different tone and it's just relaxed and conversational, it does give you some purpose. So in the thick of it, when we were in the deep part of the first year of the pandemic, which was not a picnic, all of the people gathering went away, all of the production went away, just sort of the thing to go, like, I'm not even traveling. It was a little bit maddening. And I think that the podcast world certainly exploded. Also, by now, what's really funny is I don't know how many of my friends finally wrote and published a book, but now I'm buying books every day. Like, hey, my book's out. I ask people, oh, do you listen to podcasts? And there's 3 answers, and maybe you get these same ones. Yes, love podcasts. Oh, I'm addicted to podcasts. No, I don't want anything to do with it. That don't get me started like it's a drug.
Yeah.
No. I don't dare try that. And the third is, I'll listen to yours if you'll listen to mine. They've got a podcast.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's funny. They're becoming people. I think the younger generation, they're watching them on YouTube, the ones that are filmed. It's like TV shows almost. They've become it's a perfect thing for like us, like comedians and entertainers and people that are funny. It's like you're doing morning radio almost.
Yeah.
Everybody has an access to it without having to like go get up at 6 a.m. and go actually do the radio.
Right. It doesn't cost anything.
Doesn't cost anything.
I noticed in your studio, is that attached to your house? You guys often have winter hats on, like you're in the gulag or something, like you're sitting in a frozen lake in a yurt ice fishing or something.
Yeah, it's just upstairs. I just wear those hats. Okay. Like it goes. I mean, if it be cold out, like or something, we record around like noon or 11 or something. So, I mean, I'm not far from just waking up. And I'm always cold in the morning. So some of it is like I'm still just like warming up. So I'll have to throw a hat on. Like, as a comedian, your hours are, I would love to get up at like 9, but it's just not happening right now.
Right. You're on comedy hours, and that's okay. Like you're still performing at night, right? Brian Regan and I talked about the importance of a performance nap. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a comic just needs. It's not from laziness. We can be lazy other ways, but the nap is an essential part of the routine.
Well, you got to think like tonight we have 2 shows. So I won't go on stage to the second show until probably 10 or 10:15. And so like I'll be till 11:15, you got to be the most on. And so it's hard for you to go from that to then go to bed by midnight. You're just not going to do it. It's like, so you're hoping maybe I can get to bed by 3. And then that's just what you do. I do naps too, but I've been trying to kind of slow them down. And so I've been trying to make sure I sleep as long as I can into the day. And then you can be like, all right, I'm up and let me just go through my day. But you're going to sleep till 8 or noon, 11 or noon. It depends. We slept on the bus last night. So that's always a give or take. Sometimes you sleep amazing. Sometimes you don't.
So your Nateland podcast, at least the tagline I read, was something that you tackle the questions that no one asks. Is that right?
It's a little Seinfeld-y, and like it's basically a podcast about nothing. The point of it is just to give jokes, just to make jokes, just to be funny. And so we just talk about stuff that no one cares about.
So because of that, I wrote some questions. Typically, I don't write any questions for this, but I decided to write some questions that no one asks for you, and you can decide to answer them or not.
I love it.
But I thought it might be a kind of a good forum, given that you're an expert at tackling those kinds of questions. Yeah. The first one is, do you hate rhetorical questions as much as I do?
That's a yes, right? I don't, or do I not want to be answered? I don't know how you answer that.
Or if, right?
If you, maybe you don't. You just sit there. As a comedian, I guess it would be, you should not answer. Because that's what we want from the audience, is we want to be like, yo, I don't want you to be involved. I was just asking to get into my joke.
Just laying fishing line out there so I can come hook you and bring you in.
Yeah.
Can an atheist use the Lord's name in vain?
I mean, I think so. They don't. What do they care? They have no worries about it. I mean, that's probably the one person that can use it, not have a fear.
Right. Just freely, maybe in the small G way, they can say it all they want.
Yeah, maybe they don't say it because they're like, well, at least I'll do something just, if I'm wrong. So.
All right. The fear that retroactively they might get punished.
Yes. And they're like, I don't believe it, but I'm not going to say it also. I don't want to double up on it.
You better believe in hell in case that happens.
Yes. Yeah.
Is it depressing to you to think that you spend 1/7 of your life on Mondays?
Now, Mondays are for a comedian are like our weekends. Mondays, we have a way different relationship than everybody else. I love Mondays. You can't wait for them to come. Yeah, as a comedian, you're just like, it's a Mondays are Saturday. I mean, it's the best,
Right. A guaranteed day off for the most part.
Yeah, you feel like your agents are back working now, so then maybe something will happen. You want the business week to be going. Yeah, during the week I'm a big fan of Mondays. Watch a movie by yourself on Monday. I mean, there ain't nothing during the day on a Monday. I mean, Mondays are great.
Nobody is in those movie theaters in the day on Monday but comedians.
Oh, yeah. They don't want to go. No one likes a Monday like we do. We can like a Monday and can dread a Friday.
Right. Or a 3-show Saturday. When they started doing the clubs, 3 shows on a Saturday, I used to be on that close to midnight show going, just look into the audience's eyes and say, stop me if I've said any of this.
Yes, I've done that because you don't know what's going on. You've been talking for hours.
If they don't respond to the joke, you think, oh, I had to have said it. And then you realize, no, that was just a terrible joke. You're kind of conflicted.
Sometimes you tell a joke and you wait to see what the laugh's supposed to be just to see. You're like, I might have said this joke before. And then I've gotten lost on stage. I've said the same joke before. I heard one story with Henry Cho, the guy that's opening for him. I think he was drinking. And Henry comes out and he hears him tell the same joke again. And he goes, did he just say the same joke twice? And the MC goes, no, that was the third time. He told it 3 in a row.
Henry is a pal of mine, and I think he must live in your area, right? He was in the Gallatin area when I knew him, and he's moved about. But I remember him introducing me to Krispy Kreme donuts.
Oh, yeah.
That was like a breakthrough. Not just that they had the donuts, but that they had the hot and now light, which I had no idea. So we were passing, and he just turned the car around. He's like, the hot now light's on. Like, and we're like, what is that? What's going on? So he pulled me in there, we got a dozen donuts and ate them. And then that became the greatest ritual for us. And I remember that particular location. I said to him, oh, when he was taking me back to the airport, the hot and now light wasn't on, but I go, I wonder if we can go get a picture with that light on. And when we pulled through the drive-through and asked them to turn the light on, it was pandemonium. They're, no, don't under no circumstances turn that light on for them.
That's funny.
And Henry had enough fame that he's like, oh, for like 2 seconds, can we just, the guy will stand by it. We'll take the picture. And the guy was like, I could get fired for this. It's going to be DEFCON 1 if I flip that. Traffic's going to come piling in here. But I remember that being a big moment in Tennessee, was learning about the hot and now light at Krispy Kreme.
You can't pass it up.
No, now you are fighting sugar, though. At this point in your life, you're having a different relationship with donuts. I saw you on the podcast somehow quartering and eighthing different donuts to make one donut. This is part of your health regime or your being alive forever routine. What's the game plan there?
It's just getting healthy. So I don't drink anymore. And that was something I stopped right when I was doing comedy clubs. And then I was about to start doing theaters. You know, you're just around alcohol, you know, and there's no rules. You have no boss. You have no, like, I realized this was like 3 years ago. I was like, I got to stop drinking or I'm not going to get to where I want to go. And so I've stopped drinking for 3 years. And then I'm kind of having that with food now. Like when I was eating pancakes every day and you're tired and you got to take naps and multiple naps and you're laying around, you're not doing anything, you have no energy. And so I just have realized, like, if I don't get it together now, I can't tour like I want to do. You kind of got to treat your body like an athlete a little bit, like, even though we're not athletes, but just the mental focus you got to have for an hour or 2 hours every single night is a lot. And so it's just kind of looking at it in that light. We've been doing it for maybe like 3 weeks and just trying to get healthy. And I just don't want to be miserable out here. You're just always eating out, you know, it gets old and you're just like, I can't do this anymore. So that's the point with that now.
I do admire that you see the big picture. You see that as you talk about being an athlete, it's like you definitely do want to climb to the top of Everest in the business. You can't stay at a low plateau and sit around just eating jerky and whatever. You've got to really be thinking about every step. It's the same with performance that you've talked about writing a new special. It would be very easy to live off of the first special for a long period of time, but you have to challenge yourself and you have to be in a zone that, unfortunately, there's nobody looking after you to do it. I mean, you have a wife and you have a manager, whatever, but in the end, you're the engine of the car. And if you decide that you're going to fill it full of junk, then it's just going to run clunky. And eventually somebody will pass that car and you'll be left in the dust.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great analogy of it. No one needs me to be a comedian. No one cares. I know people like to come to the shows, but it's not like you're a doctor or you're something like this. So you got to prove yourself every night to the audience that comes out. And, you know, you can skate by for a long time. But then if you realize, well, if I want to go to the highest level that I would like to go to, it's got to be railed back in. And then you just get older. I mean, I'm 42. So it's like, it's just not the same. You're just like, I just can't do it like I used to.
I saw your first Tonight Show, I think, with Jimmy Fallon. It was an amazing set. He fell all over it. You've been on a number of times. And when you start to find those cheerleaders and those champions, it's like they're giving you a power boost. It's like that Hot Wheel booster station that shoots you out a little bit further.
Yes.
You feel like, hey, I owe it to these people to do my very best. If they're going to propel me a little bit further, I need to really do that.
I was a very word of mouth guy. So I could see like when people bring the audience and like they're bringing a friend that's like, I found this guy, you got to watch this guy. And so you don't want to let all these people down, like, and just be like, well, this one was funny. It's like, you just want to stay on top of them. You stay on top of it and keep putting out stuff and not try to get distracted by whatever, whether it's drinking or, it can become eating, and just have the focus. It's the mental aspect of it. It's something you got to do, or you kind of get stuck, I think.
Yeah. You talked about your funny family. I have a family who every time we come together, any reunion, whatever, people are always pitching me their $1 million ideas. I don't know if you have family members like that, and I said, you don't really have $1 million idea. You have $1 million $1 ideas, right?
Yeah.
But he pitched me a concept of a vampire movie that needs beer to survive. Yeah. And so the 7-Eleven's got beer cans that are punctured with 2 teeth marks in it and all of that kind of stuff. And this was his big pitch. It's Beerkilla.
Beerkilla. Yeah.
He was dead set. So the next time I see him, how you doing on that screenplay? I'm like, no, nothing. I don't know. He's like, you're not really thinking about it, And I go, well, I have a tag if you want it. The vampire that lived for 1,000 beers. How's that? Just to stave him off for another year.
Yeah. He's like, oh, that's good. That's good.
I want to take a moment. This is my Nate Bargatze Shark Tank moment to see whether you want to invest in this idea or not. Because I know that you love gummy bears. That's one of your addictions, but you're trying to lay off a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So today I came up with the concept to protect gummy bears, a safe habitat for gummy bears. And you literally could have the signature Nate Bargatze's Gummy Bear Sanctuary, where you could still have them around, but you wouldn't eat them. It'd be more like a petting zoo for gummy bears.
Yeah.
How much are you willing to invest?
Throw in all of it, just every bit of it.
Everything.
All of it, and you're going to find me end up eating them, and then it becomes a big problem, and like we're being court. That's where I see it going. It's just down a bad road, but yeah, just to look at them.
That's where you get canceled, is over the idea that you've eaten some of the gummy bears that you've been protecting.
Oh yeah, TMZ's at your door, and you're just like, no, I don't have no questions. You gotta keep away from the cameras.
You're drooling some orange and yellow thing out of the side of your mouth.
Yeah. It's obvious. It's obvious he's eating them. Yeah, it would become a big problem.
Yeah, it's like what's the Tiger King kind of thing, but with gummy bears.
And look, Tiger King did great, so maybe we can do, Gummy Bear King.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. And he didn't really eat them; he just gummed them to death.
Yeah, technically, to get in a little technical game. I'm just such a big fan, so yeah, anything involved with gummy bears, I'll throw everything at it.
I'm grateful. I know with 2 shows tonight, we have to let you go. I consider this to be a real honor to have you among our creative conversation and in our community. And I will make it a point, if I have an opportunity, to make that introduction between you and Jerry Seinfeld. I know that you guys will get along famously.
I would love it. That'd be a dream come true. And yeah, it's an honor to be a part of everybody you've had. You've had everybody that I'm, studied for a very, very long time. So I truly appreciate you having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening. Take a moment to subscribe, and we will hold your seat for more creative conversation and a weekly spark of inspiration. Our show is produced by Sweetwood Creative in Austin, Texas, with sound editing and crafty co-producing by Tucker Hazel. The original music theme was created and sung by Maya Sharp, with additional production support and sanity provided by Diane Johansson, Tony Deo, and Tanner Dykstra. Please feel free to dash off a review on social media to help grow this creative community. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, or visit our website at creativityincaptivity.fun. You heard that right, .fun, as in dot was so fun. Bye for now.
Stare